You want to know what's in her fridge? Half a jar of Mayo, that's it. Half a jar of Mayo and a dead light bulb. That was Rachel, my neighbor across the street, on the phone with my daughter Parker the night everything broke open. I didn't know that call happened until much later. What I knew was this. It was February in Knoxville, Tennessee, the kind of cold that gets into your bones and stays there. And I was sitting in my own living room in the dark, coat on, gloves on, candles burned down to nothing. The electricity had been shut off 2 days ago. My name is Naomi Davidson. For 38 years, I ran Jefferson Elementary School on the east side of Knoxville. I wasn't just the principal. I was the woman who stayed until 7 p.m. to make sure every child had a ride home. The woman who bought lunch tickets out of her own pocket. The woman parents called when their kids were in trouble because they trusted me more than they trusted the system. I retired at 66 with a $12,000 monthly pension, federal, guaranteed, earned. I was supposed to be done working for everyone else. I was finally supposed to rest. That was 3 years ago. Now I was rationing crackers. Not because I was broke, not because I'd made bad decisions, because my daughter-in-law, Maisie Lawson, smooth, blonde, always smiling, had locked me out of every account I owned, had convinced my son Leon that I was slipping, confused, a liability. Leon, my boy, the one I drove to every debate tournament from Knoxville to Nashville, the one I sat with in the hospital when he had his appendix out at age 9 and cried because he was scared, the one who became a businessman, moved us all proud, wore suits and shook hands and said, "Mom, you don't have to worry about anything anymore." The one who handed Maisie the keys to my life while I was sick with pneumonia and too weak to read what I was signing. That was 18 months ago. 18 months of disappearing money. 18 months of the pension isn't as much as you think, Naomi. 18 months of cameras at my door, a $75 weekly allowance, spoiled food, broken heat, and a phone I knew was being monitored. 18 months of being told I was confused every time I knew exactly what I was talking about. I heard the car pull up, then the knock. I moved slow. Arthritis had gotten worse without proper medication, and the cold made everything worse. And when I opened the door, the afternoon light hit me like something I'd forgotten existed. Parker stood on my porch, my daughter, who I hadn't seen in 2 years, who I'd stopped calling because every time I tried, Maisie answered and said I was resting. Parker didn't say hello. She looked at me, really looked, and her face did something I hadn't seen since her father's funeral. It cracked. "Mama," her voice broke on the word. "What did they do to you?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because right behind her, another car was pulling into my driveway. And when that door opened, Maisie Lawson stepped out, designer coat, perfect hair, keys jangling, and smiled at Parker like they were meeting at brunch. "Parker, I didn't know you were coming to visit." Parker turned slowly, and I saw something in my daughter's face I had never seen before. Not grief, not shock, calculation. If you've ever watched someone you love disappear slowly and everyone around you pretend not to see it, this story is for you. Like this video, subscribe, and stay with me, because what Parker had in that folder she was carrying, Maisie didn't know about it yet. I'm not here for a conversation, Maisie. I'm here for answers. Parker said it quiet. No raised voice, no trembling, just flat, cold, and final. The way you talk to someone when you've already decided how this ends. Maisie laughed, actually laughed. Answers about what exactly? Your mother's care? Because I've been the one here, Parker. Where have you been? I watched my daughter set her bag down on my kitchen table, the same table where I used to grade report cards, where Leon did his homework, where Harold and I drank coffee every single morning for 22 years. She opened a folder. Let me back up. What Parker knew, and what I didn't know she knew, started with a woman named Julissa. Julissa worked at First Tennessee Bank on Central Avenue. She'd been a teller there for 11 years. Quiet woman, professional, the kind of person who noticed things but stayed in her lane because that was her job. For 8 months, she watched Maisie Lawson walk in every 2 weeks and move money. Large amounts, always to the same 2 external accounts, always with the same power of attorney paperwork, always alone. Julissa didn't know me, but she knew something was wrong. One afternoon, she flagged it internally. Her manager, Mason Brown, reviewed the account history and filed a quiet report with Tennessee's Adult Protective Services. That report landed on a desk. It sat there for 6 weeks. Bureaucracy, you know how it goes. But before APS ever knocked on my door, that report was cross-referenced with a tip that had already come in from someone else. Parker. My daughter had been trying to reach me for 7 months. Every time she called my house, Maisie answered, "She's resting. She's at an appointment. She's not feeling well today." Parker drove from Nashville to Knoxville twice and was turned away at my own front door, once by Maisie herself, once by a locksmith who'd just finished changing my locks on Maisie's instruction. The second time, Parker sat in her car at the end of my street and watched. She watched Maisie come and go with grocery bags that were never big enough for a week. She watched the lights go out earlier and earlier each night. She watched my car sit in the driveway, undriven, collecting leaves. She called a lawyer named Michael Fisher in Nashville, an elder law attorney she found through a colleague. Michael told her what she needed: documentation, bank records, a paper trail. "Without it," he said, "she can claim your mother consented to everything. The power of attorney is real. We need to show it was obtained under duress and abused systematically." So Parker waited. She built the case while her mother sat in the dark. And that is the thing that breaks me even now, that she had to, that the system required evidence while I was going without heat. Back in my kitchen, Maisie was still smiling. "You flew in from Nashville with a folder full of paper and you think that means something?" "Sit down," Parker said. "Excuse me?" "I said sit down, Maisie." Something in Parker's voice made Maisie actually do it. Parker laid out the first page, a bank statement, my account, 18 months of $12,000 deposits, every one of them confirmed, regular as sunrise. Then she laid down the transfer records. Month 1, $8,400 moved to an account in Maisie Lawson's name. Month 3, $9,100. Month 7, a down payment, $47,000 wired to a property escrow in Arizona, a vacation home, in the desert, while I wore a coat inside my own house. Maisie's smile didn't disappear all at once. It faded, piece by piece, like a light being slowly turned down. "Those are investments," she said. "I've explained this to Naomi multiple times. She just doesn't retain. My mother has a 38-year service record, a federal pension, and a mind sharper than yours on her worst day. Parker's voice didn't rise. Don't. Silence. Then Maisie reached for her phone. I'm calling Leon. Go ahead, Parker said, and she pulled out one more page and slid it across the table. It was a printed text message thread, Leon's number at the top. I leaned in and read the first line. My hands started shaking. Leon knew, not just knew, planned. I'm not ready to tell you what that message said. Not yet. I came as soon as I heard. Mom, I need you to understand, I didn't know it had gone this far. Leon Frazier stood in my doorway in a pressed shirt, carry-on bag still in his hand, fresh off a flight from Atlanta where his consulting firm had an office. He looked tired. He looked sorry. He looked exactly like what he wanted me to see. I had not spoken to my son in 4 months, not for lack of trying. Every time I called, it went to voicemail. Every message I left disappeared into silence. And now here he was, standing in the house he grew up in with that face I'd kissed goodnight 10,000 times, asking me to understand. I said nothing. Parker spoke first. Sit down, Leon. I want to tell you something about my son before I tell you what happened next. Leon Frazier was not a bad child. I need you to know that because what comes later will make you hate him, and I need you to hate him clearly, not lazily. He was funny, quick, the kind of kid who remembered everything, who could walk into a room and read it in 10 seconds. I put everything into that boy. Saturday morning tutoring, every debate tournament, every business camp scholarship I scraped together on a principal's salary. When he started his business firm at 32, I cried, proud tears, the real kind. I don't tell you this for sympathy. I tell you because the betrayal only cuts as deep as the love that came before it. And what Leon did, what I was about to learn he'd planned, cut all the way to the bone. Parker slid the printed text thread across the table toward him. Leon looked at it. His jaw tightened. Where did you get this? Does it matter? That's a private conversation. Between you and your wife about how long before Mom could be moved into memory care and the house listed. The room went very still. I looked at my son. I watched him decide in real time which version of himself to be. The remorseful one, the misunderstood one, the one who had reasons. He chose remorseful at first. Mom, the business had debts, serious debts. Maisie and I were underwater and He stopped, exhaled. I told myself it was temporary, that we'd pay it back before you even noticed. I noticed the first month. He flinched. I called you, Leon. I called you 11 times between October and December. You let Maisie answer every single one. I know. I ran out of heart medication, Leon, for 9 days. He looked at the table. Your father built this house. I raised you in this house, and you let your wife install cameras in it and give me $75 a week for food. I leaned forward. $75. You remember what you paid for those shoes on your feet? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Michael Fisher, our attorney, had joined us by phone, on speaker, centered on the table like a judge. He walked Leon through it plainly. Felony financial exploitation of an elderly adult, Tennessee Code annotated 71-6-120. The physical harm component, my hospitalization, malnutrition, cardiac stress, elevated the charge. The surveillance equipment installed without my consent added another count. You're looking at a felony conviction, both of you. Maisie, who had been silent in the corner, finally spoke. We'll say she consented. We'll say she was declining cognitively and we were protecting her. No jury is going to... Maisie. Parker's voice was sharp as glass. Quintin already talked. The color left Maisie's face. Quintin, their accountant, the man who'd actually processed the transfers, who had flagged it internally twice and been told to stay quiet, who, when contacted by Michael Fisher 3 weeks ago, had provided a complete paper trail in exchange for cooperation consideration. Every transfer, every account, every date. Maisie looked at Leon. Leon looked at his hands. And in that silence, in that terrible confirming silence, I got my answer. The one I'd been too afraid to ask out loud for 18 months. Did my son know exactly what he was doing? Yes, from the beginning. I stood up slowly, because my knees don't work the way they used to, and I walked to the window, the same window I used to watch Leon ride his bike from, making sure he turned at the corner before I let myself go back to grading papers. I thought about a thing I'd told my students every year at Jefferson Elementary. The worst thing you can do isn't make a mistake, it's look someone in the eye and let them believe you. My son had looked me in the eye for 18 months. I turned around. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I want full restitution. Every penny. And I want it documented, signed, and filed before anyone leaves this room. I didn't yell it. I didn't cry it. I said it the same way I used to tell a parent their child was being held back a grade, clearly, finally, with no room for negotiation. 38 years of running a school will do that to you. You learn that the moment you raise your voice, you've already lost the room. The most powerful thing a woman can do is stay completely, unnervingly calm while the world burns around her. So I stood in my kitchen in Knoxville, Tennessee, 69 years old, 20 pounds lighter than I should have been, and I looked at my son and his wife, and I did not flinch. Michael Fisher walked us through it on speaker. Parker had already prepared the documents. She'd been working with Michael for 3 months, quietly, carefully, the way you build something meant to last. The terms were not a negotiation. They were a condition. Full accounting of every dollar transferred out of my accounts over 18 months. Immediate return of liquid assets, wired back before close of business. Relinquishment of the power of attorney, signed and notarized. The Scottsdale property to be listed, proceeds returned to me. All surveillance equipment removed from my home within 24 hours. And a signed statement acknowledging what they had done. That last part was mine. Parker hadn't included it. I added it myself. I want it in writing, I said. Not for the court, for me. I want to hold a piece of paper that says my son looked at his mother and chose to do this anyway. Leon's head dropped. Maisie stared at the wall. Isabella Torres, A notary and longtime friend who'd worked at Jefferson Elementary when I was still principal arrived at my house at 4:15 that afternoon. She didn't ask questions. She took one look at me sitting at my kitchen table, then at Leon sitting across from me, and she set her seal kit down without a word. Some people just know. As Leon signed the first document, his hand hesitated over the page. "Mom, sign it, Leon. I just need you to know that I never wanted—" "I know what you wanted. You wanted the money without the guilt. You just couldn't figure out how to have both. Sign it." He signed it. Maisie signed hers without speaking. She'd gone somewhere behind her eyes, that place people go when they realize the version of themselves they'd built is finished. Good. After Isabella left, after Michael confirmed the wire transfer had cleared, after Parker had photographed every signed document and sent copies to 3 separate secure locations, the house was quiet. Leon stood up to leave. He paused at the kitchen door, the same door he'd run through as a boy, screen banging behind him, hollering that he'd be back before dark. "I'm sorry, Mom." I looked at my son, this man I had made, this man I believed in longer than he deserved, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not rage, not relief. Grief, plain and heavy as riverstone. "I know you are," I said, "but sorry doesn't warm a house, Leon. Sorry doesn't fill a prescription. Sorry is just a word people use when they've run out of options." He left. The door closed. Parker put her hand on mine on the table, and we sat in the silence of a house that had been cold and dark for too long, and I let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. Not just to me, because of me. Because I trusted when I should have verified, because I signed papers I should have read, because I believed that blood meant safety and learned the hardest way, that it doesn't. I was not confused. I was not declining. I was not the fragile old woman they'd tried to make me, but I had been alone. And alone, even the strongest person can be taken apart, slowly, quietly, piece by piece. 2 days later, the district attorney's office called. Mason Brown from First Tennessee had submitted his full report. Quintin's cooperation had been formalized. The APS investigation had been upgraded. The DA, a woman named Isabella Reyes, no relation to my notary, told Parker plainly, "We have enough. The physical harm component alone makes this a strong felony case. We're moving forward unless your mother objects." Parker looked at me. I thought about every elderly person who'd called the school over the years asking if their grandchild was okay because nobody else was checking. I thought about the woman down my street last spring who told me her nephew had drained her savings and she was too embarrassed to report it. I thought about 18 months of darkness. "I don't object," I said. But that night, after the calls, after the paperwork, after Parker fell asleep on my couch, wrapped in the good quilt, I sat alone at my kitchen table with the lights on. All the lights. Every single one. And I let myself cry. Not the kind of crying I'd done for 18 months, hunched under blankets, hoping no one could see me through the cameras. The other kind. The kind that means, it's over. You made it. You're still here. The court finds the defendants guilty on all counts. 4 words. I had waited 19 months to hear 4 words. The courtroom in Knox County Criminal Court was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, the particular stillness of a room where serious things happen regularly and nobody gets used to it. Parker sat beside me in the front row. On my other side, Rachel, my neighbor, the woman who'd called Parker the night everything broke open. She'd driven herself downtown that morning without being asked, put on her good coat, and sat down next to me like she'd always been there. Sometimes people surprise you. Maisie Lawson stood at the defendant's table in a gray blazer, her attorney beside her. She didn't look at me. She hadn't looked at me once during the entire proceedings. Leon Frazier, my son, stood at a separate table with his own counsel. He looked older than his age, smaller somehow, like a man who'd been carrying something too heavy for too long and had finally set it down, except setting it down didn't feel like relief. It looked like collapse. The prosecution had been methodical and merciless. Quintin's testimony laid out the financial structure in plain language. Every transfer, every account, every dollar routed away from a woman living on crackers in a cold house while a vacation property sat in the Arizona sun. Mason Brown from First Tennessee testified about the pattern of transactions and the internal flag he raised. The attending physician from my hospitalization testified about my condition on admission: severe malnutrition, cardiac stress, dangerous medication deprivation. He used the word preventable 4 times. I counted. Maisie's attorney argued consent, argued cognitive decline, argued that every decision had been made in my best interest. The DA, Isabella Reyes, put my pension records on the screen. 38 years of service, federal documentation, $12,000 monthly, consistent, unambiguous. Then she put up 18 months of transfer records beside it. She didn't say a word for a full 30 seconds, just let the jury look. Before sentencing, I was given the opportunity to speak. I had written something, 3 pages, careful and considered. Parker had read it the night before and cried twice. I stood up, smoothed my jacket, the good navy one I hadn't been able to wear for a year because I'd lost so much weight, and I looked at the courtroom. I didn't look at Leon, not yet. I ran Jefferson Elementary for 38 years, I began. I told children every single year that the most important thing they would ever do was tell the truth, even when it cost them something. I believed that. I still believe it. I am here today because someone decided my truth didn't matter, that my mind was disposable, that my comfort, my safety, my life were acceptable losses. I want to be clear about something. I am not a confused woman. I was never a confused woman. I knew exactly what was happening to me. I documented it. I fought it. I survived it. Not because the system moved quickly, because it did not. I survived it because my daughter refused to stop looking for me. But I think about the women who don't have a Parker, the ones sitting in dark houses right now with no one building a case on their behalf, the ones being told they're imagining things by the very people eating their pension money. That's who I'm standing here for today. I turned then. I looked directly at Leon. He was already looking at me, eyes red, jaw tight. I loved you completely, I said, and you knew that. You counted on it. You used it. I don't know yet if I'll find forgiveness for that. Maybe I will, but forgiveness is mine to give when I'm ready. It is not yours to demand. I sat down. The room was absolutely still. Maisie Lawson received 9 years, Tennessee Department of Corrections, felony financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, elder abuse, unlawful surveillance, fraud. Leon Frazier received 5 years with the possibility of parole at 3, contingent on full restitution compliance and mandatory financial ethics programming. Full restitution was ordered, every dollar, $214,000 accounted for, plus interest, plus legal costs. The Scottsdale property was liquidated. The money came home. 3 months after the sentencing, I did something I'd been thinking about since the hospital. I started the Naomi Fund, a small nonprofit legally established with Michael Fisher's help, operating out of a donated office space on Magnolia Avenue in Knoxville. The mission was simple: emergency legal and financial intervention for elderly adults experiencing exploitation. Rapid response, no wait list, no bureaucracy. Parker served as board chair. Rachel ran the volunteer coordination. Julissa, the bank teller whose quiet flag had started the paper trail, joined our advisory board. She cried when I asked her. "I didn't do enough," she said. "You did what you could with what you had," I told her. "That's all any of us can do. Come help us do more." Within 6 months, we had assisted 14 families in Knox County alone. One evening in late October, almost exactly 2 years after Maisie had handed me my first $75 envelope like I was a child receiving an allowance, I sat on my back porch with a cup of coffee. My heat worked, my lights were on. My car was in the driveway, full tank, keys on the hook where I'd always kept them. Parker was inside washing dishes, talking on the phone, laughing at something. I listened to her laugh. I thought about Harold, about how he used to say that the people who came back to you after hard times were the only ones worth counting. I thought about how right he was. I thought about Leon, somewhere in a state facility, working through whatever accounting of himself he was capable of, and I felt the grief again, quieter now, more like weather than emergency. I thought about every woman who'd ever sat in the dark alone and convinced herself she was imagining things. You weren't imagining it. Your instincts were right. The confusion they planted in you was a weapon. It was not the truth. I finished my coffee, went inside, turned every light on. If this story stayed with you, share it. Not for the algorithm, for the person in your life who might be sitting in the dark right now, convinced no one will believe them. Elder financial abuse affects 1 in 10 Americans over the age of 60. Most cases are never reported. Most perpetrators are family members. Know the signs. Make the call. Be someone's Parker. Naomi made it. So can they.